For the last 33 years or so, I've focused on changes in cognitive functioning in older adults, particularly the effect of aging during adulthood on memory and on language. The kinds of things that older adults will report is that they are having more difficulty remembering words that they've known their whole life. This is something that cognitive scientists call the tip of the tongue phenomenon. And in fact, what started me on this research, literally, was I had a colleague who had retired. She was in her 70s, and she came into the lab to be tested. And she didn't think much of the testing we were doing because it was, at the time I was working on language comprehension, which is not a problem for older adults. And she turned to me and she said, "Debbie, if you want to investigate something that is really important, then investigate why I can't remember the name of my friend of 20 years when I go to introduce her." And I took her advice, and that's what I've been doing for the last 30 some odd years. It's where you know a word and you just can't think of it. And it's particularly problematic with proper names. And this is a part of normal aging, that it becomes, that one starts to have more of these experiences. And what research on aging shows is that there also are some changes in the ability to learn new information. So it'll take older adults a little bit longer to learn new information. But there is also, we've learned, and my research has shown this, that there are a lot of aspects of cognition that don't change with age at all. And in fact, language comprehension, understanding language, understanding the meaning of words, these are all things that are very well maintained with age. And in fact, vocabulary increases throughout adulthood and doesn't start to level off until well into the late 70s. So that's an example of a cognitive function that really improves during adulthood. And in all of our studies, our older adults have better vocabularies than our younger adults, and Pomona College students are extremely smart. People who are more highly educated have some immunity towards catastrophic cognitive change in aging, things like dementia. And the way we look at this, people who have higher education will dement at a slightly older age than people with lower education. And this has been attributed to the fact that people who are highly educated and intellectually active have farther decline before they cross some threshold where they are considered to show some signs of pathology. In the research that's been done, the things that have been identified are education level, maintaining active intellectual lifestyle during adulthood, and I can talk about that some more. Having a partner or a spouse who's smarter than you are is helpful in maintaining one's cognitive functioning. And also physical exercise. And physical exercise is actually very interesting because we've known for decades that physical exercise helps to maintain physical health. What we didn't know is that it also helps to maintain cognitive functioning. And there's now very clear evidence that people who exercise regularly have better, superior cognitive functioning during aging once they get into their 60s, 70s, 80s. So it's a very important factor in maintaining a high level of cognitive functioning. We give a demographic questionnaire where we always ask about whether people exercise, and the idea is that one of these days we may correlate performance with level of exercise. We have only done that with word finding problems where we did find a relationship. Looking at the Montclair walkers, we found a relationship between how many miles a week they walked and how many word finding problems they had experienced in our lab. My biggest surprise has been the difficulty of word finding. I mean, much of my research has focused on these word finding problems, and particularly for proper names. I started doing this when I was in my late 30s, and I had older adults say to me, that they would look at a picture of a movie star. They could remember all the movies this person had been in. They could remember the last time they had seen them in a movie, but they couldn't remember their name. And it was just a total blank. And one of the differences between the way older adults and younger adults respond to this is that older adults, for the most part, just are quite, some of them at least, are quite relaxed about it and don't try and come up with the name, because they know if they just turn their attention to other things that the name will pop up. And in studies that we've done, we've shown that most of the time these names do spontaneously pop into consciousness at some later point. And I was very impressed with my older adults that they had learned to do this. And now, as I myself have grown older and have more of these experiences, I understand what they mean when they say their mind just goes blank. There's just nothing there. They have a total blank for the name. So and we have people who come into our lab to participate in our research. These are people who live in the community. And we test them on various kinds of word finding problems that we have. And they ask how they do, and we say, of course, that they've done fine. And they say, oh, well, thank goodness, because I was so worried I was dementing. Because this is such an annoying problem. It's older adults' most irritating and annoying problem, according to various surveys that have been done. But they still worry that this is a sign of pathological aging, that it's not part of normal aging, and it certainly is part of normal aging. Well, I guess the first thing I'll address is the exercise, because this is really quite startling. And this is research that's really been developed in the last 10 years or so. And what it suggests is that, and we're not talking jogging or running marathons or anything like that, it's just walking. And it has to be done with some regularity, 3 to 5 times a week. If you can work up to a couple of miles, a mile or two, that's terrific. And it's interesting because it has to be aerobic exercise, but it doesn't have to be jogging. Walking is sufficient, brisk walking. And the control groups that they use in these studies, where they look at the level of functioning, so they will give people who are engaged in exercise on a regular basis versus those who aren't, various kinds of cognitive tests that involve new memory, that involve what we call executive processes. And executive processes are sort of the building blocks of human cognition. They're things like being able to control your attention, being able to resist distraction, to stay focused. And those processes in particular are well maintained with exercise. And of course, the early studies were looking at people who in their own lives were exercising versus not exercising, but there's a huge selection factor there, because people who may be ill are less likely to exercise. So there have now been a series of intervention studies where they take people who are all couch potatoes and they put some of them on the treadmill, and the others, the control group, they'll just give health information to. And after 6 weeks or so, you can see the difference in the cognitive functioning. It's really quite dramatic. We really welcome anybody in the community who's interested in participating in our research. I mean, our research depends on the goodwill of older adults in our community. And by older adults, we basically are interested in people who are in their middle, late 60s, all the way up into the 80s. And they would contact me at Pomona College in the Department of Linguistics and Cognitive Science, and I would we work out a time that's mutually agreeable. We also have a small payment that we give people, but yes, we are completely dependent on older adults coming into the lab.